Balancing all the parts of student life can be quite daunting when you have your classes, your midterms, your socializing, and then making sure you're taking breaks, and all the different factors that go into a busy semester or a busy year. It can be a frustrating experience, so today I wanted to break down some of my strategies that I used when I was a student to manage my workload stress. Now, a lot of advice on stress and workload management will vary, so today I wanted to give a more bird's eye view of different methods of managing your stress. Today I wanted to organize the strategies into two categories: short-term and long-term. Now we'll start off with short-term, and we can define short-term by basically anything that doesn't take too much time to learn and apply. These are things that you'll do when you hit that busy point in the semester or when things start getting really stressful. So the first strategy is to work off a checklist. Now this is one you'll hear more often, and it's a really good strategy to implement. Basically what this means is at the beginning of the week or before the week starts, you'll write out a list of things you have to do each day. For example, you might need to study for a certain midterm coming up for a certain class. You might need to write a paper, and then you might need to work on a group project. Say those are the three big things that are coming up for the week. So you'll list those on a checklist, and then as you go throughout your days, you will basically check off whatever you do, and then anything you don't accomplish for the day, you'll move to the next day. Or if you accomplish something and you're ready to go to the next step, you'll add that to your checklist and then start on that the next day. The pro tip with a checklist is to be as specific as possible. Rather than writing down vague tasks to do like study for midterm, you want to get really nitty-gritty with it, so that way when you sit down to do that task, you know exactly what you have to do and you can get started on it without spending too much time thinking about the specifics. For example, say you were studying for your midterm coming up, you could put on your checklist, study for 2 hours on anatomy, run through these specific modules, and create these specific practice questions for review. That way, when you sit down to study, you know you have to focus on modules 1 to 4, and that you have to create practice questions specific to those modules. This is just a way of making sure that your checklist is working for you. The next tactic is to schedule your week ahead of time. By this, I mean spending the weekend putting in your calendar specific slots where you have to do certain things. For example, you have your class schedule, but then you might schedule time to study, you might schedule social time as a way of a break, and then you might schedule your tasks for your campus club or your organization or your part-time job or whatever else you have to do. By fitting everything into your schedule, you can take a look at it and know each day what you have to do and then what your week looks like. That way you're less likely to miss anything and you're less likely to fall behind because you can schedule times to make up work. And then the other added benefit is being able to spread your work out throughout the week, so that way you're not dumping everything on a single day or forgetting anything. The third tactic is taking breaks. Now, the big thing about taking breaks is that you don't want to leave it as an afterthought. You want to make sure that you're treating your breaks the same way you would treat your study time or any important tasks that you have. Even if the breaks are short, you still want to make sure that you're doing them as best as possible for you. Now, everybody takes breaks in different ways. For me, I like to take more frequent breaks, and I like to spread them out throughout the day, and I also like to make sure I'm getting away from my electronics or whatever I'm working on. So that may include taking a short walk outside of the building or away from whatever I'm doing, or if I'm studying at home, going down to the kitchen and grabbing a bite to eat or grabbing a drink of water. There's also different ways of fitting your breaks in. I've heard people really like using the Pomodoro technique, where you study for say 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break and then back to 25 minutes, 5-minute break. Now, everybody has different ways of working, but you want to make sure that your breaks are frequent enough and that they are optimized, if we want to use that word, to you. So those are the 3 short-term strategies. Now let's jump into 3 long-term strategies. I define long-term strategies as anything you have to work on over time in order for it to be beneficial for you. Now, I'll get more into this in a second, but one of the examples of a long-term strategy is a healthy habit. Now, the reason I call this a long-term strategy is that you can't really add a habit in and have it work well for you in 2 or 3 days. Building a habit takes a little while. So by long-term strategies, what I'm getting at is you want to plan these ahead of time, preferably before you have a busy workload. So that way, when the workload does pile up and you do have that busy period of time, these habits are basically automatic. Okay, the first long-term strategy is cultivating a healthy mentality. So this is the more philosophical or mental side of managing your stress. Now, there are two mindsets that really helped me when I was dealing with a heavy workload or a busy semester. The first mentality is looking at anything stressful as something positive, like a challenge, as opposed to something negative, like a threat. I'll link a Q&A in the description with a researcher who was studying the effects of stress, and specifically the concept of framing stress to be more positive and its effect on our mentality. But the idea is to view your stress as a challenge and an opportunity for you to get better. By reframing it in that way, you're going to change your mental conversation. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, you may look at each task and say, this is an opportunity for me to buckle down, to work hard, and to show that I can do this. Now, this won't solve stress entirely, but by viewing stress as an opportunity to better yourself, you're going to shape that conversation to be much more positive and reduce the amount of stress that you feel. The second mentality is to remind yourself that you're going to be okay. One of the patterns I see with students is that they view these major assignments or stressful scenarios as sort of the be-all, end-all. They may look at a midterm and say, if I don't pass this, my life is in shambles, everything's gonna suck, and it's gonna be terrible, and I'm never gonna recover. Now, I am being overdramatic, but I have met students who have reacted this way, and treating everything as such high stakes can be very detrimental to your health and actually interfere with how well you do, because you're spending so much time obsessing over the specific midterm or test or assignment, and that's getting in the way of you being able to study it effectively. So what I remind myself in these scenarios is that I will be okay. No matter what happens, no matter how hard it is, I will still be able to move forward after it's all said and done. If you get a bad grade on an assignment, so be it. You'll be able to do another assignment and bring your grades up, or if you have to, you'll take the class again. I know that doesn't seem ideal, but people have done it and they've still been able to bounce back and still accomplish a lot. So remind yourself during the busy periods that no matter what happens, you will be okay. The second long-term strategy is what's called meta-learning, which is basically a fancy way of saying learning how you learn best and doing more of that. I've talked about this in previous videos and I tell students this all the time, but the idea is to play to your strengths. Everybody studies and learns subjects in different ways, and the worst thing you can do for yourself is to study the same way everyone else does. I have friends who study best when they sit in a quiet area and run through their notes on their laptop, going slide by slide or sheet by sheet and retyping notes. Now that does not work for me. Seriously, I cannot do that. But I learn best using a whiteboard and pacing back and forth and talking to myself. Now I know talking to yourself sounds kind of weird, but I'm doing it right now. I'm sitting in my room at 11:30 at night on a Monday talking to my phone, so it's not too far-fetched for me. But that idea of studying, scribbling my thoughts out on a whiteboard, pacing back and forth, working through the content in a much more dynamic way, works a lot better for me. And I actually noticed throughout my undergrad, the classes where I used a whiteboard to study, I ended up doing a lot better than the classes where I didn't. So the idea here is to figure out how you learn subjects best and do more of that. Now that'll take a bit of time to figure out, but if you can identify the ways you learn best and you do more of that, you will see an increase in your grades, and you will also see a reduction in your stress because you'll be able to learn things at a much more efficient rate. And the third and final long-term strategy is to develop healthy habits. Now, I won't get too much into what habits are, but I do want to define really quickly 3 types of habits that will be beneficial for you. The 3 are science-backed habits, habits you enjoy, and then habits that take up your entire experience. Science-backed habits are basically specific things you can do that have been proven over time through scientific research to be beneficial for stress reduction or your mental health. An example of a science-backed habit is mindfulness meditation. Habits you enjoy are specific things you've done throughout the years that bring you some form of happiness. Now that is really dependent on you. For example, a lot of my friends and I really enjoy watching comedy TV shows and find that when we're watching comedy TV shows, we're able to relax a lot more, and that reduces our stress. For you, it might be something like going for a run or skateboarding or doing something that you have done throughout the years that you find makes you happy or brings you enjoyment. And then the final one is a whole experience habit. Now this is an idea I got from the concept of flow or flow state, but the idea is to do something that takes up almost all 5 senses. Something that you don't really have any time to sit back and think while you do. A common example of this is swimming, and a lot of people have reported that swimming helps them forget about everything outside of the pool and just focus on what they're doing. Other people refer to playing an instrument as a full experience, so if you do play an instrument, that might be something to consider. Other people like running or playing a sport. Now, there are many different things you can try, so test out different things and find something that gives you that full experience and takes your mind off of whatever you're worrying about. Cultivate that as a habit and then start doing more of that when things get busy. So those are the different strategies that I've used throughout the years to manage my workload stress. Specifically, didn't go too in depth into any of these because I wanted to give that more holistic perspective on workload stress and stress management. If there are certain ones you'd like for me to talk about more, let me know and I'll make more videos explaining those more in depth. Now, I know how difficult school can be, especially with all the factors that go into the life of a student. I hope these strategies help you when it comes to managing your stress during your time in school. If you have some strategies for how you manage your workload stress, leave a comment and let us know. Other than that, thank you for tuning in. I hope this helps and I will see you in the next one. Take care.